Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be with Dr. Maya Bugg Faison. She's the founder and CEO of Bugg Consulting Group, also an adjunct professor of public policy at the Doctor of Education program at Vanderbilt. Maya's had many leadership roles, especially in education. She was the CEO of the Tennessee Charter School Center and the
Mhm.
state executive director at Education Pioneers. She spent almost 2 decades advocating for really wonderful public schools for our students and also providing consulting services to many different clients across the country. She holds a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, a Master of Education from Harvard, and also a Doctor of Education in Leadership, Policy, and Organizations from Vanderbilt. Maya, I'm so happy for you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Maya, we always start our podcast talking about identity. So I want to
Yeah,
ask you about identity. How has identity played a role in shaping your career?
yeah. So I'm born and raised out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I grew up in a household. My mom and dad, my two sisters, and my mom and dad have been together since they were 13 years old, and they just turned 66 this year. And they've always been really, really specific about the role of education. It was the kind of household where we got spelling words during the summertime. We listened to educational radio shows and we studied Black history, these little booklets that they would give us so we can learn about our culture and our contributions as Black folks. And so I grew up and in a Black neighborhood, and I went to all Black elementary schools. So I grew up feeling pretty confident about being Black and what that meant and how we have contributed to history and to the present. But I also grew up knowing that as a Black young girl, that there were certain expectations that I was supposed to thrive. I was supposed to go do something important. And so originally, my plan was to be a doctor, like a surgeon or something like that, because it was impressive and I was considered a smart girl. I would get straight A's. I would join all the clubs, sing in the choir, go to church. I just did all the things. And so at that time, if you were a smart Black child and you wanted to prove like I've done something impressive, well, you had to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I think engineering was just coming into the scope. And so I decided I'll be a doctor. And I started along that track, investigating things with science and all that, until one day when I was in my high school, late middle school, early high school, I was volunteering. Like I said, I did all the things. So I was volunteering, and I was a tutor for maybe young elementary school kids, first, second, third grade. And I went to the top public school in the tri state area. And I mean, everyone had to test into this school. We walked one block up the street where we did our tutoring, and there were Black and Latino kids, mainly Puerto Rican. And the children were trying to read on the screen, the computer screen, directions. And it said, press start, press enter to start. And the little girl, it might have been second or third grade, she could not read the screen. I said, Maya, can you help me? I don't understand. And so at that moment, I'm looking at this little girl who looks like she could be my cousin, another Black young lady in Philadelphia, one block from one of the top public schools in the nation, really. And how is it that I'm at this top public school and we're doing algebra, let's say in sixth grade, and we're reading these novels and such, and this young lady or young girl is one block up the street from me in the same public school system, and she cannot read, right? And so that moment, kind of thinking about what does it mean to be a Black young lady in Philadelphia and in the school system, something just shifted. So I changed my plans from being a doctor and decided I'm going to go into the education system. I want to figure out why is this a thing? I want to know how does the system work and then how do we disrupt it? How do we make it so that everyone is receiving the type of education that I was receiving one block up the street from where this young lady was? And so race was very prevalent for me and gender.
A lot of what you shared, Maya, about beliefs, your parents' belief in you and your siblings, your belief in yourself being surrounded by books and literature and examples of incredible role models who look like you.
Yeah.
And there was no question, what do I want to be? Okay, a surgeon. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, Maya, talking about beliefs, because you had this beautiful, not to say there were challenges, but supportive, loving, affirming structure of beliefs. What were, if any, beliefs that were shared with you that looking back, you're like, damn, that was not was actually not quite correct. I'm curious if there were any that you believed
Yeah.
around these myths that you believed early on that you realized later, not true.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny you asked that. As I mentioned, I had a very supportive family, and my mom and dad were teen parents. They had my oldest sister right out of high school. Eventually, my dad, he's an artist, and so he had to drop out of art college to take care of the family. And my mom ended up going back to school when she was mid-20s or so. And she was able to get her degree in accounting and eventually became a CPA and the first Black person to hold one of the highest seats in the city comptroller's office of Philadelphia. I'm very proud of them.
Wow.
Anyway, so they had their struggles in being young parents and all the things. So super supportive family. But I remember when you talk about beliefs that turned out to be not so true or myths that turned out to be not so true. I remember I ran track and cross country. And one day I took the trolley home with a friend named Jake. It was a white boy, and we were friends. And I remember I came in a little late, and I forget why my dad was upset. I don't know if I came home too late after track practice or something wasn't setting right with him. And I remember him telling me, who are you with? And I said, I was with my friend Jake. And he says, well, Jake's your friend now until y'all grow up and he becomes your boss.
Mm,
Yeah. And so I remember thinking like, whoa, where did this come from? Right. Because it
right.
was so antithetical to everything I had been trained. I wanted to be a surgeon. I remember my mom and dad giving me books to study folks like Dr. Charles Drew, the
Mm,
first transplants and things, right? And so I remember like, he's Black, I'm Black, I can do this, right? And so what I found was that as I became older, my parents became more worried about the realities of society
mm,
and their own experiences in working hard and things not being fair and it's not the scales being tipped depending on race and gender and income. And so my dad expressed that frustration at that moment. He didn't give me a ton of detail, but I will never forget it.
let's go to that moment, Maya,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
sadly, when these things were happening to me, I thought it was me, right? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that actually it's the system. And I'd love to go to you, Maya, and talk through a moment where you were realized like actually it is unfair. What was that? What was one of those moments? Sadly, I'm sure you have many. What were one of
Oh
those
yeah.
moments, and how did you handle that?
You know, I have several, unfortunately. I have several moments in my career from being in school all the way through now. I'll give one example. Um, I just ended my tenure as the president and CEO of the Tennessee Charter School Center. I was there almost a decade, but I remember when I was first interviewing, first off, I didn't apply for the job. Partners and others kept reaching out to me saying, we need you in this role.
Mm-hmm.
And the recruiters and such. So eventually I say, okay, I'll have the conversation. So it went from a conversation to, and now you're a finalist. I'm like, whoa, I wasn't planning to, be the CEO of a charter school center, right? So that was not in my plan. But here I am. So now I'm a finalist, and they got me in this room at a hotel where there's multiple panels, and there's panels of school leaders and executives and community members. I remember going into these panel conversations and feeling like, I think I kind of nailed that. I remember leaving one of the sessions thinking, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to be the CEO of the charter school center. And that was not my plan because I felt like I had done so well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just wasn't my plan. Anyway, everything goes well. And what I thought was true. I get some feedback from some folks who were in those different sessions. I mean, it's 3 big sessions of all these people. And they said, you rocked it, Maya. You nailed it. And almost everybody, 90 something percent of people voted for you, said you should be the next CEO.
Mm.
Well, the board at the time, certain board members at the time had already wanted the other candidate. They had already told the other candidate that they were a shoe-in,
Mm.
white male.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
You already know, white male. And so their plan was getting off the rails because here I am. They probably had me in the mix because a lot of people were pushing for me to be in the mix, and because they could say they had diversity in their candidate pool. They
Right.
would be able to say one of our top 2 finalists was a Black female. They can check both boxes. But I kind of came from behind and surprised this board at the time, and everybody voted for me. And so what should have been then an offer to come turned
Mm-hmm.
into an extended interview process. They started adding steps to the interview process
Ooh.
to try to weed me out because everyone kept voting for me. They were trying to get back around to the original guy that they wanted to have the seat. And so it was supposed to be the final interview. I mean, we're at a hotel, we're rotating rooms, there's panels, and then they added another interview day with another panel in a different location, and then another conversation. And finally, yeah, they added multiple new steps to this process because everybody kept voting for me, right? And I was coming in with a few years of state level executive leadership experience. I'd have a ton of education experience. That's my role. That's my sector. That's my expertise. But they just were surprised that I kept coming up to the top. And so eventually I go to the board. I say, listen, y'all called me, you know, I didn't come looking for this job. I've got other opportunities. I'm doing great in my current position. I've got multiple other organizations that are tapping me on my shoulder, trying to recruit me to work for them. I'm not thirsty for this job. If you're not confident that I'm the one, or you already have other plans, then let's end this process here because I'm not going to keep jumping through these extra hoops.
Wow.
And so I think what happened was when I was on a plane actually going to talk to one of those other organizations that was flying me out to like wine and dine me down in Louisiana, one of the wives of the school leaders who was close to the board told the board, I saw Maya. My wife saw Maya on the plane, and she's going down to talk to such and such organization. She's not bluffing you all. And then apparently several school leaders and other community members started calling the board like, if y'all fumble this ball with Maya, we will not be supportive of this organization because we know what you're doing isn't right. I was so shocked to see people step up and step in like that. I wasn't used to that. You're used to folks just kind of minding their own business. And so it was definitely a moment where I realized, if those people hadn't had the courage to try to disrupt the flow of what was happening, I probably wouldn't have gotten a job offer, either because I would have removed myself from the process because of the foolery that was happening, or because they would have eventually found a way to say, oh, actually, we're offering it to this other guy. But if those folks hadn't spoken up, and if I hadn't said, hey, I'm not thirsty for this job, I got other options.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where things would have landed. And, I'm glad I ended up taking the position. And I remember I had to negotiate hard for my salary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And because I looked up the 990s, I said, I don't know how much you're paying this other guy. And I'm coming in with more experience than he's leaving with.
Yep.
Right. And they said, oh, you were really leaning in. Remember that book, that book, Lean In or something? They said, oh, you're really leaning in. So we ended up coming to some type of compromise and all that. But if I hadn't had the courage to speak up and name that was an inequity, that why are you trying to pay me, give me an offer, maybe $50,000 or so lower than what I saw in the 990. If I hadn't checked it, if I hadn't spoken up, they would have felt perfectly fine to give me such a low ball offer. So yeah, there's multiple examples of, if this hadn't been in place, if I hadn't spoken up, if I didn't have champions, the system would have swallowed me up, and I wouldn't have had access to certain opportunities and positions that I moved into.
Maya, I want to talk through your moves because the moves that you made were critical to you being in this important position where students and communities really benefited to have
Yeah,
you, specifically Maya Bugg Faison, and your identity in the seat. So I want
yeah,
to talk through what I heard. One is you had the guts to call it. And that took a lot of strength. Just that alone to say,
yeah.
I'm not thirsty for this job.
Hmm.
Really important to speak your truth. So you did that. Second, you had alternatives. And often in negotiation, you're only as
Yeah,
strong as your best alternative. And so you had other wonderful alternatives, and people were seeking
yeah,
you. So
yeah,
you stated that and you went after that. And third, you mentioned it earlier, champions, people who are willing to also speak up instead of just
yeah,
grumble what the hell is going on. They actually made the calls and said, we are not going to stand by this. So
exactly.
I want to name those three things because the first move, Maya, the guts to say something. Can we talk through that? Have you always been the kind of
Yeah.
person who just was like, I'm going to call it, you say that with a hard truth? Where did you get that? What kind of, can you give like some skills, some ways of building that oomph to speak hard things to powerful people?
Yeah. That is that is an excellent question. I think the other factors that you named in that summary had an influence on that as well, right? So knowing that I had options, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that I was working, I had a job already, like I had a position that I was in, I was thriving in, so I didn't have to leave that job.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I could be exploring these other opportunities, that gave me a bit more um, uh, courage as well. But I think about in my younger days, and now that you say that, I think I have been speaking up throughout that time, and I'm guessing it goes back to my upbringing with my parents, and they didn't raise us to be kind of meek or mild necessarily. They wanted us to be able to um, speak up. They wanted us to be able to name things if we saw that were not right. And so I think also um, once I was in undergrad, and I did my undergrad at University of Penn, and the types of programs and activities that I involved myself in were many of them, many were very Black centered. And I got a lot of just encouragement from the other Black students, some of them upperclassmen, seeing these Black professors. Um, it was pretty empowering. And so we were involved in different things that were more, um, like, for example, we were doing like a Saturday academy with Afrocentric curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we're working with kids across the city and we're encouraging them and teaching them about our culture and
Mm-hmm.
about our strength, right? And so I think we were teaching the kids, but I'm teaching myself too. And I think it just kind of like absorbed, like in our conversations and our experience. And so I think just in the activities that I chose and the volunteer activities that I did, the people I surrounded myself with, my major or rather my minor in undergrad was African American Studies.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very aware of racism and reading things like The Souls of Black Folks, Dr. W.E. Du Bois, and other material, right? So I was aware, I think, growing up with some of the conversations with my parents, but then studying things in undergrad made me very aware. Um, I remember I did my master's program at Harvard in urban education. Well, I remember having to speak up there as well. It's interesting to reflect back and say, what was I doing speaking up, saying all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember we had a professor who was a retired school teacher. She had taught for decades, older white woman, and she was teaching us one of our methods classes. And she had a co-teacher who was a younger Black male. A young white woman who was one of my cohort members Comes back, we're in class. She says she's crying. She's upset. She says, you know what? One of these kids stole my purse today.
Mm.
And we were working at a school with mainly Black, Latino, Kurdish. It was just a very multicultural, international type place.
Mm-hmm.
The professor tells her, well, it's just the nature of these kids. Essentially, the nature of these kids was to steal. And this is what the professor shares in front of our entire class of future teachers who are majority white. So I'm waiting for this co-teacher, minimally this Black co-teacher, to speak up. He
Mm-hmm.
does not. He does not.
Mm.
Look around the class. No, everyone's just taking notes. They're writing it down. This must be
Mm.
true.
Mm.
I've got two friends in that class. One's Black, one's Mexican and Chinese. And we're just looking at each other and we're exhausted. Okay, which one of us is going to take this one this time? Because we would take turns having to speak up about these things. And so we raise our hand and we have it spiraled into a whole conversation. They had a special weekend that they hosted because they said we were making people feel unsafe because we called out these inequities and the error and the bias and the racism in that comment. It just, that's a whole other conversation we can have about my experience in that teacher ed program. But it was just another example of, I feel like we've always, it's kind of, you don't speak up, who will?
I want to ask you about that because there is a piece of the work you're doing where it's not just Maya. It's Maya with others,
Yeah.
with students, with classmates, with your community. And I want to go back to that, the three things you named. One is that you called and you called it out and you spoke truth. Second
Mm-hmm.
is that you were having the other alternatives, that there are other options so that you
Yeah.
didn't need them or need this job. And third is you had champions.
Yeah.
So this piece I want to talk about because Maya, they're these people, I imagine they're powerful. I imagine
Oh,
they had to
yeah.
know what was going on. And I'm wondering, how did you make that happen? I don't want to take full credit, right? But I imagine that you built the relationships. I imagine that you kept them up to date. Can you give us more insight into how you enabled that to happen for them to champion you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Building relationships. So I moved from North Carolina to Tennessee um, almost almost about 12 years or so ago,
Hmm.
um, to launch at Pioneers, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when I got to Tennessee, I only knew one person's name. I didn't know anybody. And part of my job was to help build and grow our partnership base and to build a name for Ed Pioneers. So you're thinking, okay, that's going to be a heavy lift because I don't know anybody in this whole state.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I became very intentional about building relationships and building my network. And so as I mentioned, I get there that summer, I know one person's name. By the end of that year, I had met with probably every education entity between Memphis and Nashville and all in between. And so the way I did that was I would start with that one person I know. And I go meet with her and I say, we have coffee. We build a rapport. I say, who else should I be speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, give me three names of people I should be speaking to. Do you mind giving me an introduction? She makes the introduction. Now I meet with those three people.
Mm-hmm.
I ask them the same question. Who are three people I should be speaking with? And I should get to know I'm new in town. Then they give me three names and they make the introduction. So this spirals and I'm tracking all this because I like to track, I like to keep data. I'm setting goals each week. I'm going to have 60 meetings this week. That's my target, right? And then keeping it in the database and saying, all right, I met with this person in September. Let me make sure I send a follow-up checking in on them. And this other month, and let me make sure I do another coffee date or happy hour meeting or whatever, and a few months after. So I did that between Memphis and Nashville. And what I realized I was making strong relationships, but I didn't realize I was also building champions just in
Mm-hmm.
how I was moving and how I was supporting these partners. I didn't know, to be quite honest. I didn't know I was creating these champions. I thought that I had a good reputation, thought that people trusted me, they thought I operated with integrity, but I hadn't been in a situation where I needed champions to step up. And so when they
Mm-hmm.
did step up, I was pleasantly surprised, and I realized the value of these relationships. These were people, the people who were stepping up were partners that I had developed over those couple of years. And so there was a contingency of Black leaders who kind of got together and said, we're going to put an end to this. And they collaborated and they coordinated and they said, we're going to call this board and we're going to tell them that if they don't do the right thing, we can't support. So I was very impressed. They put their names on the line for me without me asking.
Wow. And Maya, speaking to you, you made that happen. Deliberate, intentional, values aligned, tracking, data aligned. I mean, it's while we're very grateful for the support, I want to make sure I'm also raising a sign of a model, right, of how we
Yeah.
can intentionally build those relationships so that they can be there to champion it when we particularly need it. With that, Maya, are
Absolutely.
you ready for lightning round questions?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, chocolate or vanilla,
Vanilla.
cooking or takeout,
Neither. I prefer going to restaurants. I love to go to a new restaurant and get appetizers and samples and all the things.
would you rather climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
You will never see me jumping out anybody's plane. It's just not going to happen. So, but I have climbed a mountain before and I was very proud of myself.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
That is so unacceptable. Why would you put on socks with your sandals? You got to let your toes breathe. They do that a lot in Philly. The guys in Philly, they don't want to show their toes. It's weird, but yeah, no, unacceptable.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
Believe it or not, I've only done karaoke once, and that was my first time was maybe 3 months ago at my bachelorette party, and we sung Lauryn Hill. Um, so I think we did pretty good. I think we were at a good solid 7.5. We hit the notes and everything.
Nice. What's a recent book you read?
You know what? I haven't read any books this year. I've been wedding planning. I guess I've been reading books on wedding planning and all of those things. Um, but one of my favorite books is actually it's called The Chance for Change,
Mm,
and it's the story of the pre-K programs that the federal government was supporting, the
mm,
Early Start Head Start program, and it's not a very it's inspirational and sad all at the same time. And
mm,
it talks about how a community of Black folks, low income folks down in the South, were able to rally together and hire and train themselves and each other to be the teachers for their own kids, to make sure that their curriculum represented their values and their culture, and still make sure that it was integrated into their, math and reading and science and all that. And they were being funded. People were able to then earn a living wage, earn certificates and degrees, buy homes, buy land. It was an amazing start for the program. But just like many other things, once people saw, the government and others saw the progress that was being made by these communities of Black folks, they ended up shutting down the program, taking the funding away. So it's a very telling book, and it's one of my favorite. It's just well written, and although it's heartbreaking, it's just a very well written text.
mm. What's your favorite way, Maya, to practice self care?
Oh, I love, of course, everybody says the spa, but I love going out with my friends or with my husband and just laughing. And like I said, I love to try new restaurants, going to rooftops. Um, that's my favorite thing, to laugh and go and not talk about work. We talk about everything else but work. I mean, and sometimes we're just being so silly. I will literally laugh until I cry. Tears are running down my face. That is my favorite thing to do. It's just be in good company with my man or with my buddies and laugh and eat and just enjoy.
What's a good professional development you've done?
You know what? I really enjoyed that Women of Colors retreat that where we met for Pahara Institute. And I think it was less about professional development and more about reflection. And with that reflection, you're able to take it back to where you live and to implement it. I think that's the best type of professional development. It's something that is accessible and useful outside of the training session.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, don't tell yourself no.
Hmm.
Right? We have the tendency to see an opportunity or hear about something that we want, and then we tell ourselves, "Well, I can't get that," or "I don't check all the boxes," or "They're probably going to hire that other person instead of me," or "Do I belong in this room?" And so I do executive coaching as well, and so one thing I tell some of the folks I work with is don't don't say no to yourself before you even give yourself a chance, right? The person you're interviewing with or trying to connect with, they may tell you no, but they might tell you yes. So don't shut yourself down before you even try it, right? And I know as people of color and Black women, we tend to tell ourselves no a lot. I know they have data around like when you look at a job description, and it has like those job descriptions, they have 30 different qualifications listed. The certain research says that as Black women, will, or just women, period, will go through the list, and if we don't meet almost all of them, we don't apply.
Mm-hmm.
We tell ourselves no. Versus white men, they'll check a third, and they're like, "I'm gonna nail this." They put in their resume and they get going, right? And they probably get hired,
Yes, they
right?
do.
Yes. So I would just tell myself, don't tell yourself no. Go for it. You belong in every room, even if you're the only one that looks like you there.
Hmm.
You belong there. You're expert at what you do. Don't let anybody make you feel like you're not, or that what you have to say is not worthwhile, and not valuable. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
So powerful. Where can we find you, Maya? Like LinkedIn, your website?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn under Maya Bugg Faison. I'm on Instagram at Maya M Bug. And I have a website for my consulting firm, the Bugg Consulting Group. We do a ton of strategic planning. We do a lot of equity audits where we evaluate your policies, processes, and procedures and see what the gap is between where you aspire to be in terms of being a more inclusive organization versus where you actually are. And then we help you reconcile that gap and give you clear recommendations on how to close it and to be who you want to be as an organization, values aligned. We do executive coaching. We do a lot of data analysis, focus groups, interviews, things like that. We've worked with groups from, I don't know, lots of groups, National Center for Youth Law. We've worked with multiple foundations. I've done speaking engagements for Tory Burch, for Coach, for FedEx, and Progressive Insurance. Work with the U.S. Congress. We work with dozens and dozens of organizations, and it's been a great feeling to know that we are impacting millions of folks through our work, and helping organizations to go from intention to action on being more inclusive organizations.
Love that. Intention to action. Let's stop with being just in our heads. Let's like make it happen. Love it, love it.
That's right.
And
That's
then
right.
last question, Maya, do you have a final ask, recommendation, parting thoughts to share?
Oh, just I want to thank you for doing these interviews. I think it's very important that we share our stories as women in the space. I think it's great that you are collecting these stories about how to move into leadership roles, and hopefully taking away little nuggets to share with everyone. I think that's great. And so I wish you the best. I'm excited for what you have ahead of you as well and the work that you're doing. And so I am a fan. So you just let me know any way I can help and champion you at any point.
Thanks, Maya. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much.